The battlefield was quiet, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of death. Smoke curled from broken machines. Fires burned low in the distance, crackling faintly as if whispering the last words of the fallen. The ground was scarred with deep craters, the remains of bombs and shells. Pieces of shattered ships lay scattered like the bones of giants. The air smelled of ash, blood, and burning metal. In the middle of this ruined land lay a single figure. Her name was Arinya, princess of the Valorians. Her people called her the Starborn, the shining daughter of their proud empire. She had been raised among marble palaces and golden halls, her life filled with music and light. But now she lay broken in the dirt, her silver skin stained with blood and dust. Her long cloak, once bright with royal colors, was torn into rags. A thin crown rested crooked on her head, cracked by a soldier's strike. Her body trembled with pain. A jagged piece of shrapnel had cut deep into her side. One leg bent at a wrong angle, useless for walking. Every breath she took came shallow, heavy with effort. Her glowing eyes, once bright and full of command, now flickered like dying stars. She tried to rise, but her strength betrayed her. With a cry that was half anger, half despair, she collapsed back onto the ground. The world spun around her. Her fingers dug weakly into the dirt, clinging to the earth as if it could keep her alive. Her mind returned to the moment it had all gone wrong. She remembered the retreat, her soldiers shouting, the blinding flashes of enemy weapons. She had called for them to hold their ground, to wait for her, but in the storm of fire and fear, her commands had been lost. Her guards had fled. Her army had taken to the sky without her. They had left her, the princess of the Valorians, heir to the throne, symbol of their strength, abandoned in the middle of the battlefield like a broken weapon. The thought pierced deeper than her wounds. She had been raised to believe her people loved her, that they would protect her at all costs. Yet when the moment of truth came, they had chosen their own lives over hers. For the first time, she felt the taste of betrayal. Arinya coughed and blood stained her lips. She pressed a trembling hand to her side, but the wound would not stop bleeding. Her vision blurred. Around her, the ruins seemed to close in. The silence pressed harder. The only sounds were the crackle of fire and the lonely whistle of wind through broken steel. She was utterly alone. Her lips moved, whispering words in the Valorian tongue. "I am not ready to die here. Not like this." Her voice was hoarse, almost too soft to hear. But the battlefield gave her no answer. Above her, the sky was stained red by the fading sun. Shadows stretched long across the wreckage, covering her body like a shroud. For a moment, she wondered if her people would even remember her. Would her name be sung in the great halls? Or would they pretend she had fallen with honor, hiding the truth that they had abandoned her? Tears welled in her glowing eyes. She let them fall freely, tracing lines down her silver cheeks. Her pride had kept her strong through war, through endless battles. But pride could not hold back despair. She tried again to crawl, dragging herself inch by inch across the dirt. Her nails scraped against the broken stones, her breath rasping painfully. Every movement sent waves of agony through her shattered leg, but she refused to stop. If she lay still, she knew death would claim her. And yet, as the minutes passed, her body weakened further. Her arms gave way and she collapsed face first into the dirt, her cheek pressed against the cold earth, and her eyelids fluttered shut. The princess, once so full of life and power, now looked like nothing more than another corpse among many, but deep within her a tiny spark remained. A whisper in her heart told her she was not finished yet, that somewhere, somehow, there was still hope. She did not know that fate was already moving, drawing a stranger toward her. She did not know that help was coming, not from her people, not from her army, but from a lone human who wandered the battlefield. For now she lay broken and alone, waiting at the edge of life and death, and the battlefield held its breath. The ruins of the city stretched endlessly, broken buildings standing like the bones of giants. Dust hung in the air, carried by a bitter wind that stung the eyes and dried the throat. Among this destruction walked a lone human, his boots crunching softly on the debris. His name was Daniel. Daniel had once been a soldier. He had worn the uniform, carried the rifle, and marched with his brothers. But the war had broken them. Too many faces were gone, too many names lost. When peace never came and sides no longer mattered, he had laid down his gun. Now he was nothing more than a survivor, drifting from ruin to ruin, searching for food, water, and something worth holding on to. He moved carefully, always listening. The battlefield was never truly empty. Scavengers lurked. Patrols searched. Sometimes wild animals crept through the ruins. He trusted no one and expected nothing but danger. That was why the sound caught him by surprise. At first he thought it was the wind, but then it came again. A faint, broken cry carried through the smoke. Daniel stopped in his tracks. His instincts screamed at him to ignore it. Noise meant trouble. Trouble meant death, yet he stood still, listening. The sound was weak, but there was something in it, something human, though not quite. It was the sound of someone in pain, someone who did not want to be alone. Against his better judgment, Daniel turned and followed. Step by step, he moved through the rubble, pushing aside twisted beams and shattered stone. The closer he came, the clearer the sound grew. A voice, a plea. When he finally reached the ruined square, he froze. There, lying among the wreckage, was a figure unlike any human. Her skin glimmered faintly silver even beneath the dirt and blood. Her robes, though torn, spoke of wealth and power. A cracked crown rested near her head. Her glowing eyes, dim but alive, flickered toward him. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. An alien, not just any alien, a princess if the symbols on her clothing were true. He had heard of the Valorians, their empire, their pride. Many of his friends had died fighting them. His first thought was simple. Walk away. She was not his problem. Helping her could mean death. If human patrols found him protecting her, they would shoot him without hesitation. If her people returned, they might kill him too. Logic screamed at him to turn his back, but he did not move. Her eyes met his. There was no pride left in them, no command, no threat. Only pain, only fear. Only a silent question, will you leave me too? Daniel felt something stir in his chest. Something he had buried deep since the war had taken everything from him. He saw not an alien, not an enemy, but a living being abandoned and broken. He thought of the countless soldiers left behind on battlefields, of comrades he could not save. He remembered the cold sting of loneliness, the way silence pressed like a weight when no one came for you, and he could not walk away. Slowly, he stepped closer. The princess flinched, her hand weakly lifting as if to shield herself. Daniel raised his own hands in peace. I'm not here to hurt you, he said softly, though he doubted she understood a word. His voice cracked from disuse, rough and quiet, but gentle. He knelt beside her, his eyes scanning her wounds. Blood still flowed from her side. Her leg was bent wrong. She looked fragile, ready to break with a touch. Carefully, he reached for his pack, pulling out cloth. He tore strips from his own shirt, pressing them firmly to her wound. She gasped in pain, her glowing eyes narrowing, but she did not push him away. Daniel worked quickly, hands steady though his heart raced. Every second he stayed increased the risk, yet he could not stop. When the bandages were tied, he met her gaze again. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. He spoke, though he knew she could not understand. You're not alone anymore. Something passed between them then, silent, fragile, but real. A thread of trust, thin as glass, yet strong enough to hold in that moment. Daniel sat back on his heels, staring at her. He did not know what came next. He had no plan, no reason, no promise of safety. All he knew was one simple truth. He could not leave her behind. And though the fires still burned around them, though danger lurked in every shadow, for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt a spark of purpose. The human and the alien princess, two strangers. Two enemies, were no longer alone. The war had left ashes, but in those ashes, something unexpected had begun. The princess opened her eyes again. The world around her was blurred, but one thing she saw clearly, the human who stayed. He had not left her. He had not turned his back. His rough hands were stained with her silver blood, but they pressed firmly on the bandages he had made. Arinya, daughter of the Valorians, had never thought a human would dare touch her. In her empire's halls, humans were spoken of as primitive, violent, selfish creatures. They were enemies, rivals, obstacles to the glory of her people. Yet this man did not look like a monster. His face was tired, lined with old sorrow, his eyes dark with exhaustion. But in them was something she had not seen for a long time. Care. Her lips parted. Words came in her language, soft and weak. Do not leave. Daniel could not understand, but the trembling of her voice, the way her fingers reached for his arm, told him enough. He shook his head gently, whispering, I won't. For a while, silence settled over them. The only sound was the faint crackle of distant fire. Daniel worked slowly, wrapping more cloth around her wounds. She winced but did not resist. She studied him with those glowing eyes, watching every movement. When he was finished, he sat back, his chest heaving. His shirt was ruined, his hands sticky with blood. He should have felt fear. She was royalty, the daughter of an empire that had spilled so much human blood. If she lived, her people might return. If they found him, they could punish him for daring to touch their princess. But when he looked at her, broken and helpless, fear melted into something else. He took out a small canteen from his pack, lifted her head carefully, and let a few drops of water fall onto her lips. She drank weakly, her throat working as if even swallowing was painful. Afterward, she closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they shone with quiet gratitude. It was then Daniel realized something. She trusted him. It was not a loud or sudden trust. It was fragile, delicate like a candle flame trembling in the wind. But it was there. Her eyes no longer looked at him as if he were a stranger. They looked at him as if he were the only thread holding her to life. Daniel felt the weight of it. He had never asked to carry someone's hope again. He had carried dying comrades before, felt their last breaths on battlefields where no one came to save them. He had promised himself he would never take that burden again. Yet here he was, holding it once more. The princess's hand twitched, weakly reaching toward him. He hesitated before placing his hand in hers. Her skin was cool, almost cold, but her grip, though faint, tightened around his fingers. Neither spoke, for words meant little between them. She did not know his language, and he did not know hers. But silence carried its own meaning. After some time, she tried to sit up. Daniel quickly pressed her back down, shaking his head. "You'll only make it worse." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Reluctantly, she let herself sink into the ground again, though frustration burned faintly in her eyes. Her pride was still there, even through the pain. She was a princess not used to weakness, yet she had no choice but to let this human, this stranger, care for her. The moment felt strange for both. For her, it was the first time she depended on a human. For him, it was the first time since the war began that he chose kindness without reason. Night began to fall, shadows stretching across the ruined square. Daniel built a small fire with broken wood, enough to give warmth but not enough to draw patrols. The flames cast a soft glow over them, flickering against the silver of her skin. She watched him work, her eyes softening. At last her voice came again, weak but determined. She spoke a single word in her tongue, one that Daniel did not know, but he could feel its meaning in the way she said it. It was not a command. It was not a threat. It was a plea. And Daniel, though lost in translation, answered the only way he could. He stayed. He sat beside her, keeping watch as the night deepened, his eyes scanning the darkness for danger. The fragile thread between them held firm. On a battlefield filled with betrayal and abandonment, trust had taken root in the unlikeliest of places. Between an alien princess and a human wanderer, neither knew where it would lead. But both knew this. They were no longer alone. Daniel sat in the dim glow of the fire, his back pressed against a broken wall. The night around him was restless. Somewhere far off, explosions still echoed. The war had not ended. It had only moved to another corner of the world. Yet here, in this ruined square, there was a strange pause, a fragile pocket of peace. The princess slept fitfully, her breathing shallow but steadier than before. Each time she shifted in pain, Daniel's eyes flicked toward her. He was no healer, but his hands had done what they could. For now she lived, but survival was not the same as safety. He knew this. The question gnawed at him as he stared into the flames. What now? He could not stay here forever. Patrols would come, searching the ruins for survivors or deserters. Scavengers could stumble upon them. Her wounds needed more than torn cloth and scraps of water. If she stayed here, she would die slowly. And if he chose to take her with him, that was another risk altogether. Carrying her meant slowing down, drawing attention. If soldiers found them, they would shoot without hesitation. To them, she was an enemy commander. To them, he would be a traitor. Logic whispered its cruel answer. Leave her. Walk away while you can. Save yourself. But each time the thought came, his gaze drifted back to her. The crown cracked against her temple, the dirt staining her silver skin, the quiet flicker of light in her eyes when she had held his hand. He remembered the way she had whispered words he didn't understand, but he had felt their weight all the same. Do not leave me. He had seen too many left behind before, comrades bleeding in the mud, calling out names that would never answer, faces staring at the sky waiting for rescue that never came. He had promised himself never to carry that burden again. Yet something about this alien princess made that promise break apart. Daniel's hands curled into fists. He knew the choice was already made, though he tried to deny it. He could not leave her. Not when she was alive, not when she still fought for breath. When dawn touched the ruins with pale light, the decision became real. He stood stretching sore muscles, then knelt beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, weak but alert. She tried to speak, her tongue forming words foreign to him. He could not understand, but he answered softly anyway. "We're moving." He slid his arms beneath her fragile body. She winced at the touch, biting back a cry but did not resist. With a grunt, he lifted her, her weight heavier than he expected. She was tall, her frame built with the grace of her kind, and though she was weakened, she was no small burden. Step by step, Daniel carried her out of the ruined square. His boots slipped on loose stone, his back strained, but he did not stop. Each breath he drew was ragged, but each breath carried him further from the place of death. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder. Sometimes she stirred, her glowing eyes opening just enough to look at him. She said nothing, but her gaze was heavy with meaning. She knew what it cost him to carry her. She knew he risked everything for her. And though pride and sorrow fought within her heart, something new began to grow there as well, something she had never felt for a human. Trust. Hours passed. Daniel's body ached, his legs burned, but he forced himself onward. The ruins offered little comfort. Collapsed towers, burned streets, hollow shells of homes. He searched for a place safe enough to hide. At last he found a half-collapsed building, its roof still standing, its walls thick enough to keep out the wind. Carefully, he set her down on a bed of torn blankets he had scavenged earlier. His chest heaved, sweat dripping from his brow. She looked at him, her silver lips parting as though to speak, but no words came. Instead, her hand lifted weakly toward him. For a moment, he thought she would push him away, but instead her fingers brushed his arm, a faint, fragile touch softer than a whisper. Her glowing eyes met his, filled not with command or arrogance, but with gratitude. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He sat beside her, rubbing the ache from his arms, his heart heavy but steady. He had chosen. He had chosen the harder road, the dangerous road. He had chosen to carry not just her body but her hope. And though fear gnawed at him, though he knew the cost could be his life, something in his chest felt lighter. For the first time in years, he had a purpose again, not to fight, not to destroy, but to protect. The weight of choice was heavy, but it was a weight he accepted. And in that broken building, in the ashes of war, a fragile bond grew stronger. The night came heavy and cold. The broken building gave some shelter, but it could not keep away the chill that crawled through the cracks. The fire Daniel built flickered weakly, its light dancing across the ruined walls. Shadows moved like ghosts, reminding both man and princess that danger was never far. Arinya lay on the bed of torn blankets, her face pale, her breath uneven. The bandages Daniel had made were stained dark with blood. Every time she shifted, her body trembled with pain. She had been raised in palaces of comfort, carried through life by servants and soldiers. Never before had she felt weakness so deeply. Never before had she been so powerless, but now, she had no choice but to rely on a human. Daniel sat close to her, his back against the wall, watching her with tired eyes. He had fought many battles, seen comrades die in his arms, but this felt different. She was not his comrade, not even of his kind. Yet her pain cut through him in a way he could not explain. Perhaps it was the loneliness he saw in her. Perhaps it was the memory of being left behind himself. As the night deepened, she stirred. Her glowing eyes opened, unfocused at first, then settling on him. Her lips moved, speaking in her tongue, the words soft and broken. Daniel did not understand, but he leaned closer, catching the tremble in her voice. She was afraid. He reached out slowly, his rough hand resting gently over hers. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice low but steady. "I won't leave you." The words were meaningless to her ears, yet something in his tone reached her heart. She did not need to know the language to understand. His voice was like a shield, warm and solid in the cold night. Her fingers curled weakly around his hand, holding on as if it were the only thing anchoring her to life. For the first time since her people abandoned her, She did not feel completely alone. Daniel stayed awake through the long hours. He fed the fire whenever it threatened to die, tore strips of cloth to change her bandages, and held water to her lips when she could drink. Each task was small, yet each one meant survival. His body begged for rest, but he refused to close his eyes. He knew how quickly life could slip away when left unwatched. At one point, she began to shake, her body caught in waves of pain. Her teeth clenched, her breath came in harsh gasps. Daniel knelt quickly, pressing his hand against her wound, whispering soft words, though he knew she could not understand. "Hold on, you're stronger than this. Don't give up." Her glowing eyes locked on his, wide with suffering. Tears welled and spilled down her silver cheeks. She tried to speak, but only a broken cry escaped her throat. Daniel did the only thing he could. He leaned close and pressed his forehead gently against hers. His eyes closed, his voice soft and steady. "You're not alone. I'm here." For a moment, the shaking eased. Her breath slowed. Her grip on his hand tightened. She clung to his presence like a drowning soul clinging to a lifeline. And Daniel, though exhausted, held her through it all. Hours passed, heavy and endless. The night outside was cruel, filled with distant gunfire and howls of the wind. But inside the ruined building, a fragile world existed. Just the two of them fighting against the darkness together. When at last the worst of her pain passed, Arinya's body relaxed. Her glowing eyes half closed, her hand still holding his tightly. With a voice barely more than a whisper, she spoke one word in her language. Daniel did not know it, but he felt its meaning. It was not a command. It was not anger. It was gratitude. A single tear slid down his cheek. He had not cried in years, not since the war had hardened his heart. But tonight something inside him cracked open. He had spent so long drifting without purpose, but here, in the fragile trust of a dying princess, he had found a reason to fight again. As the fire burned low and dawn crept slowly toward the ruins, Daniel sat awake beside her. Their hands still joined. The night had been long, filled with pain and fear, but it had also brought something else, something quiet and unspoken, a bond. It was not love, not yet, and not something either of them fully understood. But it was real and it was strong enough to carry them into whatever came next. The morning light crept into the ruined building, spilling through cracks in the broken walls. Daniel blinked against it, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He had not slept through the night. His body ached, his hands were raw, but he remained at the princess's side. Arinya was still alive. Her breathing was weak but steadier. She lay curled beneath the blanket, her silver skin pale in the light. For the first time since he found her, she seemed almost at peace. Daniel let out a long breath. He wanted to believe they were safe, at least for a little while. But safety was a luxury war never gave. The sound came first as a faint thump of boots against stone. Then voices, rough and sharp, echoed through the ruins. Human soldiers. A patrol. Daniel's blood ran cold. He rose quickly, moving to the gap in the wall. Through the dust and rubble, he saw them. 5 men in worn uniforms, rifles slung across their shoulders. They searched each building with practiced ease, kicking open doors, scanning for survivors or deserters. If they found her, there would be no mercy. Daniel turned back to Arinya. She had stirred at the sound, her glowing eyes blinking open. Confusion flickered across her face, then fear. She tried to rise, but pain forced her back down. Her lips moved, whispering words in her tongue. Daniel knelt quickly beside her, pressing a finger gently to his lips. "Quiet," he mouthed, even though she did not know the word. She understood enough. Her eyes widened and she fell still. He worked fast, covering her glowing skin with ash and dirt to hide its faint shimmer. He pulled pieces of rubble and cloth over her body, disguising her as part of the wreckage. Her breath trembled as he leaned close, whispering softly, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Then he moved to the shadows near the doorway, gripping a broken pipe he had found earlier. His heart pounded hard against his chest. He was one man, unarmed, facing trained soldiers. He had no plan if they discovered her. But he could not let them see. The soldiers' voices grew louder. They entered the building across the street, their laughter cruel, their boots heavy. Daniel's knuckles whitened on the pipe. At last, 2 men stepped into the ruined doorway. Their eyes swept the dark interior. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. The men moved slowly, their rifles raised, searching. One kicked the debris near where Arinya was hidden. Dust rose, but she did not move. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. If she made even the smallest sound, they would see. The soldier frowned, poking at the rubble with his boot. Then, after a long moment, he spat on the floor and muttered, "Nothing here." The two turned back toward the street, calling for their companions. Their footsteps faded as the patrol moved on, their voices drifting farther into the ruins. Only when silence returned did Daniel move. He dropped the pipe, his shoulders shaking with relief. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself back to Arinya's side. She lay still beneath the rubble, her eyes wide, her breath ragged. Slowly, Daniel pulled away the debris, freeing her. She looked at him with tears forming in her glowing eyes. She did not know his language, but she understood what had just happened. He had risked his life to protect her. He had chosen her safety over his own survival. Her trembling hand reached for his, gripping it with surprising strength. Her lips formed a single word in her tongue, soft and filled with meaning. Daniel did not understand, but he saw the way her eyes shone when she said it. It was gratitude. It was trust. Daniel sat beside her, his chest still rising and falling with heavy breaths. For a long time, neither spoke. The bond between them had deepened in the silence. The war outside still raged. Soldiers still hunted. But here, in the ruined building, something stronger than fear was growing between a human and an alien princess. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, his hand still in hers. He had chosen the harder road, and now he knew he would walk it to the end. Whatever came, he would not abandon her. The sun dipped low over the ruined city, painting the broken towers in gold and shadow. Smoke drifted across the sky, reminders of battles still raging far away. For Daniel, the world had shrunk to the ruined building, the weak fire he had managed to keep alive, and the fragile life of the alien princess lying beside him. Arinya's strength was slowly returning. Her wound still ached, but she could sit up now, her eyes alert, her voice whispering soft words in her strange language. Daniel could not understand her, but he had begun to recognize her tone, gentle when she tried to comfort him, sharp when she warned him to be careful, and warm when she looked at him with something he had never expected to see. Trust. That evening she surprised him. She struggled to her knees, clutching his arm, and pointed toward the distant hills beyond the city. The gesture was shaky but clear. She wanted to go home. Daniel followed her gaze. The hills were miles away, dangerous miles filled with patrols, traps, and ruins. For a moment he almost said no. It was too risky. But then he looked back at her, at the faint shimmer of her silver skin, at the way she leaned on him not just for strength, but for hope. He nodded. "We'll go." Her lips curved into a faint, exhausted smile. She did not know his words, but she knew his answer. The next day, their journey began. Daniel carried most of the weight, supplies, scraps of food, and even Arinya herself when her legs gave out. She tried to walk, her pride refusing to be a burden, but each step was agony. Still, Daniel never complained. He lifted her into his arms when needed, steady and unshaken, as though she weighed nothing at all. Through the shattered streets, through the ashes of war, they moved together. Once a drone passed overhead, its red eye scanning the rubble. Daniel pulled her beneath a collapsed wall, his body covering hers until the machine flew away. His heart hammered in his chest, but he never loosened his hold on her. Another time they found a stream trickling through cracked stone. Daniel knelt and cupped the water in his hands, offering it to her first. She drank, her eyes never leaving his face, as if memorizing every line of the strange human who had chosen to save her. Each danger they faced only made their bond stronger. She began to copy some of his words, stumbling but eager. He taught her safe, friend, and his name, Daniel. When she said it for the first time, her soft voice carrying his name with care, his heart tightened. But the hardest test came on the final night before reaching the hills. A squad of soldiers cornered them in the ruins of an old marketplace. Gunfire cracked the air as Daniel shoved Arinya behind broken stalls. Bullets tore through wood and stone, sparks flying. He had no weapon, only his fists, his speed, his will. He moved like a shadow, striking from the dark, using the ruins to his advantage. He fought with desperation, every blow driven by the promise he had made to himself. He would not leave her.